Hi, my name's Adrian, and in this video I thought we'd have a look at whiteboarding. It's a great way to document your UX, UI, your application or website, even a function or a database. As a visual representation, it gives you a lot more information that you can zoom in and out of, and who wants to read doco anyway? So if you're ready, hit subscribe, hit like, and let's just jump right into it. So whiteboarding is very open to interpretation. You really design it however you need, depending on what you're building. In this case, let's take an app for example. Sometimes when you're building an app, you're not sure exactly how the flow will work. But if you whiteboard it, you'll have a better understanding of each page and each route. For example, you might have a home screen, which has to navigate to a user profile. But if that user isn't logged in, you'll want it to route to a login. After that, you might want them to fill out some more details, which is a separate page altogether. By whiteboarding it, you can have a better understanding of how that flow works. So in really large organizations or apps, you've probably seen whiteboarding already, such as big Figma boards, big sketch boards with all the lines pointing everywhere. These are very useful in understanding the navigation of an application. It's sort of like a sitemap. Personally, I like using the iPad. When I draw out applications, I take a screenshot and I put them on the iPad and I draw out a few arrows, exactly how the navigation is working. I'll also put in some handwritten notes. It's much easier just to draw out, this is an upload page and this is going up to the database here where it's being uploaded to an Amazon cloud, rather than having something in Figma but then writing in separate documentation about what's going on in the functionality. So your whiteboard might just start off as a couple of wireframes, but as you slowly build it out, you might slowly replace those wireframes with actual screenshots of your application. And the more you build those out, the better understanding you have of how your application will function in terms of UI and UX, both of which are very important. So another thing that almost never happens is real documentation for websites or for applications. Sometimes you might have inline comments or just some high-level stuff, but you never really have a segregated section where you say, this is the home screen, about us, profile, login. When you select the login and someone hasn't logged in, it'll take them to a registration page. You just assume you know these things. A proper whiteboard can really help you visualize all of these elements so that in the future, if you ever look back on this, or any person does, it makes a lot more sense, because the worst thing that happens is going back to a website or an app a few years later, or even having a look at someone else's code and going, what the hell is going on here? On top of that, it saves you time and it saves you money. The last thing you want is to be halfway through development and go, hey, this design wasn't even approved. By whiteboarding, you essentially make sure that there's consensus across the whole board, whether it's UI designers, developers, or even the stakeholders of the project. Everyone can understand a good whiteboard if it's designed well. So what's required in making a really good whiteboard? Well, personally, whenever I'm building something, I like to have a look at the competition. If I have a look at what they're doing, maybe I can take a few screenshots of their designs and how their user flow works. I can put that into my own workflow, and I can have a look at how I can improve on that and where my designs can actually enhance the user experience, which is always important if you want to make your application or website a little bit better. The next thing is to have a look at the customers. What target audience will be using the application or the website? Another thing to take note is not to spend too much time on user interface when you're doing whiteboards. User experience is much more important, and how a person will use the app and how it'll flow. If you spend too much time on user interface, essentially you might have to throw away that later, because the user interface will dynamically change as the app progresses, but the user experience of that should stay fundamentally the same if it's done right. Another valuable thing you can do is actually send a survey to your customers to find out what they think about a certain wireframe or whiteboard. Because a lot of the times people might not consider that the customers themselves might have valuable input that they can put into how they expect something to work that the business owner just might not realize because they understand the business so well or the application so well. The same concept applies to designers and developers. A lot of the times we have too much understanding of how something works, and when we try to take a step back to understand how a customer sees it, it might be completely different. Whiteboarding isn't just useful for UX and UI designers, it's also useful for backend engineers. If you've got a large-scale application with cloud servers all over the place, APIs, webhooks, sometimes it's hard to understand how the flow of data is happening. With a very good whiteboard, you can have a look at how everything is interacting, and you can pass that up to your manager or even a UI designer, and they can have a better understanding of how data is coming in. I also find it very useful if I'm writing big functions that have to call other functions. Sometimes I can create an overarching whiteboard that will sort of give me a better idea of how all these functions are interacting. So, how do you use whiteboarding? Do you only use it in UI, UX, or do you even use it to create your database schema? And if you like this type of video, please like and subscribe because it really lets me know what kind of content you guys want. Thank you.